Hey, welcome back to the About the Labor podcast here at VikingsTerritory.com. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald, and today we are talking once again about your Minnesota Vikings, who are not playing this week. They're off this weekend, of course, since they're playing next week. So we'll talk a little bit more about how this team can stay grounded. This is the kind of the part two, going off of what we talked about already earlier this week. So we'll talk about that. Talking primarily about the defense today. After that, we don't really have anything planned, so we're going to see where the conversation leads us. Just kind of go from there. I'll talk a little bit about the watch party, which I'm going to briefly detail for you guys now. It's going to be a pretty cool event down at Black Stack Brewing. So let's hop right into that real quick, and then Drew and I can start talking some Vikings football stuff. So down at Black Stack Brewing next weekend, doesn't necessarily matter which team the Vikings will be playing, in my opinion, but there will be, hosted at Black Stack Brewing, another watch party on that huge big screen TV that I showcased for you guys last time. Really, really cool place. Highly recommended by myself. Drew, any comments from, your thoughts on Black Stack at all?
Yeah, it's a tremendous room, and I think it's almost built for something like this. Like it's a large gathering room. The finest beer you're going to find in the Twin Cities area, and just a humongous screen. It's almost perfect for a giant watch party essentially. So I'm going to try and be there. I think I'll be able to be there, and I know you'll be there. So it should be a lot of fun, and I encourage anybody to come out. And I think if you give Black Stack a chance, I think you'll really be impressed.
Absolutely. So you heard it from me, and now you've heard it from Drew as well. So we really appreciate if you guys you can get your tickets. Go on to our Twitter account. It's at VikingsATL Pod. I believe right now it's the pinned tweet. So I guess depending on when you're listening to the show, that's where you can find that information. We'll be talking about it throughout the next week or so anyways. So I suppose there's no rush, but I highly recommend grabbing those tickets while you still can, just because I think that they will probably sell out. So thanks for listening to that real quick, and let's jump into some Vikings football stuff, huh? The defense. Let's start with the defensive line and work our way back. I think that's probably the best way to do this here. So Danielle Hunter, Everson Griffin, Linval Joseph, Tom Johnson, those are your four primary guys. Drew, in your personal opinion, what did you see from those four guys this season, and I guess what can we expect from them during the postseason?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should include Brian Robinson in there too. I think he played a very big role in not only helping Hunter transition into a starter, but I think just playing a rotational role, I think, is something that does have value in a team that can employ a rotational guy like that and give guys rest. I think that means a lot to football teams today, especially in a passing league where so many teams are airing it out, and you got to get guys in and out. So, but yeah, I think this defensive line's up there with the best in the league. Everson Griffin earned second-team All-Pro today. And I mean, I think Danielle Hunter had 12.5 sacks last year. I think he had 8 or something this year. You have two guys on the edge there, and you can include Robinson here too. I think he still has some gas left in the tank. Guys that can get after the quarterback at the edge and make them step up. And then when you have a Linval Joseph in the middle, and I guess Tom Johnson too as well, a couple of guys that can rush the passer as well. Clogging the pocket and not allowing quarterbacks to step up, that gives them just a even finer, I guess, a smaller room for error, a smaller room to step up in the pocket, creates all kinds of problems. So, we've talked about how this is a team defense and everything kind of, counteracts with each other, right? I mean, all these different pieces of the defense work together. And I think you could argue that this defensive line creating pressure, giving quarterbacks a small amount of time to throw is what's helping the secondary become so elite.
Absolutely. That's an argument that I think we've been making for quite some time now about how, again, I'm going to say this one more time, and I'm going to try not to say it again, but I can't make any promises. It's a team sport. In order for Harrison Smith and Xavier Rhodes to do their thing, the guys up front need to also be doing their thing. And in my opinion, you've seen a fairly complete effort from the four primary guys and also Brian Robinson, like you said. So Everson Griffin is tremendous. I think that he's established a kind of a precedent for where he stands in the league. I believe you just mentioned that he's a second-team All-Pro this year. In my opinion, that's honestly not good enough. You look at his season from not just a pass rushing standpoint, but also as a rush defender. He's been tremendous all year long. I think that he probably has earned himself first-team All-Pro recognition, but again, my opinion doesn't necessarily matter. So over to Danielle Hunter, I thought that he had a very solid season. We talked a little bit about him on the last show about what he's been able to accomplish so far and where he's going to a degree. This is a guy that has been tremendous as a pass rusher, but really is just still developing. And once he puts all those things together, I think that he's the type of guy that can be dangerous for a very long time. Tom Johnson and Linval Joseph, their work to a degree speaks for itself. Linval Joseph being this massive, massive man that basically takes zero credit for the incredible role that he plays on this team. That's just the type of guy that he is, I think. And, you need to have guys like that on your team. Linval Joseph isn't around flaunting his Super Bowl ring, despite the fact that he does have one. So that's important. And Tom Johnson, I've talked a lot about him in both generally and in the past about, this is a guy that kind of wasn't making it early on in his career, and then he comes to Minnesota, and it seems like things have really changed for him. He's always, in my opinion, he's always been a tremendous pass rusher. It's just a matter of, was he able to, get the run defense down, and that's something that I think he has improved upon throughout the year. But yeah, that's about all I got from the defensive line perspective, so let's move on to the linebacker level now. Anthony Barr, Eric Kendricks, Ben Gideon, Emmanuel Lemur are going to be your primary faces here. Mm-hmm. Any major thoughts from you on what you're seeing from those guys this year, and just kind of what to expect from them moving forward, whether it's in the postseason or into the future as a whole?
Yeah, I think for one, the UCLA duo really they complement each other very well. I think both of them are very good at defending the flat area of an offense. I think we saw both of them this year made a bunch of plays defending running backs in the flat, tight ends in the flat, what have you. Anthony Barr, humongous, step backs year for him after what happened in 2016. Kind of some doubts whether it was injury, whether was a mental thing, whatever it was. I think he erased all of those concerns this season for sure. And I think, he definitely earned his Pro Bowl recognition this year. He didn't much, we kind of laughed about last year's Pro Bowl recognition for Barr, but he definitely earned it this year. And I think Kendricks is kind of the next one in line there. I think he's due a Pro Bowl spot at some point, probably next year, I would assume. And then I think, you've pointed this out a couple times with your, when you go through your coverage chart and post clips on Twitter and whatnot. Ben Gideon has stepped up a lot, I think. Especially as a run defender. I think, you and I both didn't really like that pick in the 4th round back in the draft, but as a run defender, he has been very, very good. He's very disciplined. He makes plays. I think his run stop percentage is up there with some of the best in the NFL. So, that's a pretty good trio right there. If your third linebacker can stop the run and you don't really need him on passing downs, that's what this Vikings defense needs, and that's what Ben Gideon is giving them. So, again, we're going to keep saying this about every phase of the defense, but very, very, very good group of players. And right. Again, it's another piece of the puzzle that keeps this defense going. They complement the front four, they complement the secondary. It's all a team effort, and they definitely fill their role, more than good enough.
Absolutely. What's interesting about this linebacker level, and I think that you mentioned this a couple of times throughout your points here, is that both Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks, in my personal opinion, played at the very least a Pro Bowl level this year. For me personally, if you want to rank it, it goes All-Pro, first team, second team All-Pro, then Pro Bowl. Those are kind of like the three levels to me. And I think that Barr and Kendricks both probably earned second team nods. Again, I don't know if my opinion on the matter matters or not, but I think that those players played extremely well, and they play so well, kind of in unison as a tag team, that they're able to accomplish so much more than they have been recognized for to this point in their career. So it's great to see from Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks, and you hope that they continue to work hard and continue to be themselves and really play this game to the highest level that they have, that they're capable of. So those two guys are doing great. You mentioned Ben Gideon. I want to quick reference him just because that's a guy that when he came into the league, I wrote an article for Bleacher Report at the time, and it was a long draft article, kind of a synopsis of everything that I thought, kind of expected from the future from these guys. And I gave Ben Gideon's draft grade a C. Both you and I talked about this. We've mentioned this multiple times on the show that both of us were looking at Jalen Reeves-Maybin, a guy that was drafted to play for the Detroit Lions instead, as probably a better option for the Vikings, simply because his coverage skills appeared to be superior to that of Ben Gideon's. But what I want to say about Ben Gideon is that he has come in and worked his ass off, straight up. Like, I'm not even going to filter myself on that. That's what he has done, in my personal opinion. That's what I have seen from him. I've been extremely impressed with everything that he has done to date. And, he's the type of guy to me where if he continues to work hard, same thing as like Kentrell Brothers, they may not have superior athleticism, but they can definitely find a spot in this league somewhere if they stay healthy and continue to work hard, because they, in my opinion, very clearly know what they're doing. So those guys are very important. I guess that, unless you have anything you'd like to add to the linebacker level, I suppose.
I mean, not really. I just think that, I'm especially impressed with Anthony Barr this season. I think there's a different gear he has hit, and I think, it alludes to a point I think I made on the last show about how the peak of these players on this defense, it seems to be longer than it is for other teams on other teams, or other players on other teams. What I mean by that is, the peak, the prime of someone's career, it seems to be elongated when you're a part of the Mike Zimmer defense here. Harrison Smith has been in the prime of his career for several years now. Xavier Rhodes now is just entering the prime of his career. Everson Griffin's 31 years old now, and he's still in the prime of his career. You can go Terrence Newman. another guy he's like 40 now, and he's not in the prime of his career, but he's definitely playing at a more than capable level. He's definitely at the level of a cornerback one for Green Bay. So I think Anthony Barr is really hitting his stride. He's very much becoming a superstar. His instincts, his speed, his playmaking, it's
his
tremendous.
Frame, I used
just being his size.
Yeah,
yes.
His size athleticism combination is absurd. So, in my opinion, it's always just been a work ethic thing for Anthony Barr. Can he, fully commit to playing football year round? If he does that, sky's the limit for this dude.
He's also very funny, because did you see his tweet? Yes, he had someone posted a picture of LeVar Ball when he was probably 25, and he just looked ripped, and it looked exactly like Anthony Barr. And Anthony Barr tweeted or quoted it and said, "AB or big baller," and it's you have to look at this because it's exactly identical. LeVar Ball and Anthony Barr.
In your opinion, would you say that Anthony Barr or LeVar Ball, when he was younger, is more handsome?
I'll probably go Anthony Barr here. I'll probably go Anthony Barr. It's a weird question to ask on this show.
Is that a weird question? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I asked it.
I wasn't expecting that, so it kind of threw me off. But
yeah. Well,
fair.
You know what? That's what this show does. We like to throw curveballs. So, on to the next level then. Let's get into the secondary, I believe, unless you have any final thoughts on. I think we're good. Okay, so let's move on to Xavier Rhodes, Harrison Smith, Andrew Sendejo, Trey Waynes, Mackenzie Alexander, Terrence Newman. The secondary, it's complete, all the way around. Right?
Yep.
I think that I personally believe that Xavier Rhodes is the very best cornerback in the league. If you haven't checked out my article on zone coverage already, please do so. I think that it's a pretty well-written article, and I got some good reviews on it, so I think that's something that maybe some people should check out. On top of that, I've also been very impressed with Harrison Smith. It's hard not to be as someone who identifies as a Vikings fan. I think that the league is starting to take notice, and if they're not, I think it's definitely time for them to do that, because if I remember correctly, he actually, scored the highest. Excuse me, correct me.
He got the highest Pro Football Focus grade of any player in the NFL this season, and the highest from a safety ever since they've been, calculating and grading players. I believe that's been 2005 or 2006 since they've been doing it. He had the highest safety grade by a long ways, actually, and then the highest player grade this season. And I think so. Pro Football Focus tweeted out a poll, I think yesterday, 2 days ago, for I think there's some award they give out for the best player, and they let the fans decide it. And Harrison Smith won it with 41% of the vote. So I think it's pretty clear that the Pro Bowl voters, or whoever decides the teams, however that vote's calculated. They messed up, and Harrison Smith clearly deserves more recognition, and he is clearly one of the best, if not the very best safety in the NFL. I think he's the best. He's the most versatile for sure. And it's about time he got this credit, because everything he does on this defense, he's really the catalyst of everything Mike Zimmer does.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. Question I would pose to you then is, we've talked, we know, I think we know that both Xavier Rhodes and Harrison Smith are elite players in this league, right? I think again, I'm going to use the same thing I said about Anthony Barr before. Is I think it's time for the league to take notice of some of these guys. They just haven't yet. But Harrison Smith, Xavier Rhodes, definitely elite players. Trey Waynes, Mackenzie Alexander coming along. Andrew Sendejo is probably having his finest season to date, in my personal opinion. Still has some work to do in terms of tackling efficiently and not with his head down and that type of thing. But I think that he's played pretty well as well. So my question to you is, if you could name one defensive player of the year, if it was up to you, would you say that Harrison Smith is that guy, Everson Griffin, Xavier Rhodes? Which one of these guys from the Vikings is the most deserving of defensive player of the year, in your personal opinion?
Is you picking only Vikings, or are you picking anybody in the NFL?
Just Vikings for now. We could talk about
it's Harrison Smith then. I think he's the best player. He's the best player on this defense. He's the best player in. I think the NFC North for defense. I think that one's almost crystal clear and obvious. I just think he's so valuable in what he does. I think I'm going to bring this up now because I read an article. It was actually on the Purple PTSD site, Vikings Territory Sister site, written by somebody named Nicholas Smith. He's on Twitter somewhere. I forgot what his handle is, but he wrote an article and he actually graphed in a circle graph or a pie graph, however you want to call that, the percentages and of the positions Harrison Smith played, and it was 6 different positions that he had lined up at this season. So I got it right in front of me now. The highest percentage of his positions was actually at linebacker. So he lines up at linebacker in the box there at the greatest amount of the rest of his positions. Then next, looking at the chart here, the next would be slot cornerback, then free safety, and then the edge rushing position, then outside cornerback, and then followed by strong safety. So it's pretty clear, the his position is actually 6 different positions, and so that's why I think he might be the most irreplaceable player in the NFL as well, or at least on the defensive side of the ball, because of everything he can and will do for this defense.
Yeah, we did make this topic about specifically the Vikings defensive player of the year, but in my personal opinion, I think either Xavier Rhodes or Harrison Smith deserves the nod. I'm going to I'm going to agree with you here that Harrison Smith is probably the most deserving player because he simply does the most for just about every defense. But at the same time, you can't take away from what Xavier Rhodes has done either. So those are the 2 guys that I look at as the guys who are, in my opinion, the most deserving. I think that you can also mention Everson Griffin in this conversation as well. His sack production has slowed a little bit. It seemed like he was I think you mentioned this after the Packers game, that he was sort of slowed by their offensive line to a degree, but he still has that tenacity. I mean, there's very little doubt in my mind that Everson Griffin will come up big when he needs to during the postseason, because that's just the motor that he plays with. So, ultimately what it comes down to here is I think that Harrison Smith is the most important piece of this defense, but guys like Xavier Rhodes, Everson Griffin, Anthony Barr, Eric Kendricks, Danielle Hunter, Linval Joseph, all of these guys are worthy of some sort of recognition. And I think that Trey Waynes and Mackenzie Alexander are 2 guys that are ready to step up as well, because they have, in my opinion, played exceedingly well over the last couple of weeks. So I've been very impressed with really all of these guys are doing. That even includes Andrew Sendejo, who is a guy that I have thought was not awesome for quite some time. But I do think he is having his finest season to date, and I think that it's important that we recognize that because he's not the most naturally talented player I've ever seen. He came from Rice. So
undrafted, right? I think he was undrafted.
I believe he was undrafted as well. So as a whole, I think that this defense is the most complete defense we've seen maybe ever. Keeping in mind, of course, that I wasn't around to see the defenses that, I don't know, Fran Tarkenton played with or stuff like that. I've only seen tidbits of that type of play, but from what I have seen from this unit is
the most complete defense in Vikings history.
History, for sure.
At least since the Purple People Eaters, because we weren't alive then.
Right. Sorry about not being alive.
Sorry for being born. Sorry for not existing yet. Yeah. But
I'm with you. I agree. This is the most complete defense I've personally seen, and this is also, a defense that, I think this is an extremely dominant defense. I think it's comparative to let me rephrase this. I think that you can compare it to Seattle's defense or Denver's defense. Those two are in recent memory are kind of the ones that stick out as the best defenses we have seen. That Seattle defense was able to sort of neutralize any mistakes that Russell Wilson made early in his career, and then we remember well that Denver defense was able to neutralize pretty much Peyton Manning's everything at the very end of his career.
Yeah, 2015, yeah.
Right. So as a whole, this is a very complete unit and a team that I think will continue to play exceedingly well. And hopefully, if they continue to work hard, that maybe this season right now is just the beginning of something really special. And that's something that I firmly believe at this point. And, I don't see myself wavering on that unless, something demonstrative happens, I suppose. So that's how I feel right now. Let's pause real quick. I want to do a quick ad read about, let's call it a sponsor note, I suppose. Speaking about SOCOM Creative, which is, the company that Drew and I are represented by, they do a tremendous job. First of all, they do a tremendous job representing us, and secondly, they do a tremendous job getting people into the right place for their skill set. It's not necessarily it's a tough. Let's put it this way: they take your business very seriously, and they take it so seriously that sometimes they tell you exactly what you need to know, and that to me is very important. So I highly recommend checking out SOCOM Creative and all the work that they do. They have been great to us, and I believe they will continue to do so. So let's move on to the latter half of this show now.
Talk about the All-Pro selections quick, if you want to. Just go over those because I think we've have some not disagreements, but there's a couple guys that maybe could have gotten on those lists. But the first teamers, Harrison Smith and Xavier Rhodes made those teams. I think those were pretty. We agree with those. I think Harrison Smith. It's funny because we did have that question on our show a while ago about how many players have made the All-Pro team and not made the Pro Bowl, and I can't imagine it's very many. We did get a response on the article posted on VT about that podcast, and one of the readers gave out a list of players from back in the 70s. But it appears as if it's been a really long time since that's happened. So to be first team All-Pro and not make the Pro Bowl. So Harrison Smith, kudos to that, and obviously Xavier Rhodes. The numbers against the elite receivers in this league speak for themselves. And then the second team, Adam Thielen made it as the receiver with Julio Jones. That's some decent company there. And then Everson Griffin made it as an edge rusher. And Xavier Rhodes also made the second team as a defensive back. So it's Xavier Rhodes got recognized as both first team cornerback and second team defensive back. That shows why the voting for All-Pro the players need to have a specified position, because I think these guys they vote them into positions rather than just voting the guy.
Right.
And so Rhodes got enough votes for defensive back on second team and enough votes for cornerback on first team. But it also shows how dominant Xavier Rhodes was this year. So, and at least he got the recognition for that. I think I could have, for an interior lineman on the second team or first team, I think Linval Joseph could have deserved some recognition there. You could also throw in Anthony Barr, linebacker, but it's to have four guys like that recognized, I think is pretty. I guess one guy twice, you can count it as five, but four or five guys recognized on the All-Pro teams is usually a good thing.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. All of these guys have played exceedingly well. I think that in my opinion, the obvious candidates for first team selections were, and I guess to a degree still are, Harrison Smith, Xavier Rhodes, Linval Joseph, and those three guys are definitive first team in my personal opinion. But then you look at other guys like Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks, who I believe were not recognized in that capacity this year. That's something that they'll have to continue to work hard towards moving forward here.
For what it's worth, it does look like for linebackers, a lot of the guys that did get, that were recognized were some pass rushers. You had Chandler Jones in there on the first team, and on the second team, you had Von Miller, C.J. Mosley, Telvin Smith. So, and then the guys that actually beat out Linval Joseph for the interior linemen, Aaron Donald, which understandable, Cam Hayward in Pittsburgh, and then on the second team you had Fletcher Cox and Calais Campbell. So, I mean, there's a lot of names up there. There's a lot of good interior linemen in this league. So he did have some stiff competition, but I think his name, I would assume Joseph's name was at least thrown around in the votes here. So,
absolutely. So, is there, I guess, is there anything else that you'd like to add here before we move on to, I guess, the end of some Twitter questions and then the end of the show here?
We did get some decent Twitter questions here, so
let's check those out.
Let's I kind of have to go through these somewhat quick, because we actually did get kind of a lot of them. But our first one is from our buddy Daryl Stofferin. I think that's how you say his name, Stofferin. But he's proposing a rule here about disallowing head coaching interviews until after the entire season for everybody. So, this would be, regardless if the team is done or not, whatever the circumstance is, no head coaching interviews until after the Super Bowl has concluded, and that I would assume that next day. How do you feel about that? Would that be fair to everybody? What are your thoughts on that?
I guess I don't really have a true opinion on this. I honestly, I'm more interested in hearing your thoughts on this in this situation, just because I think this is something that we have discussed off the show before, and I think that you could probably do a better job explaining this than I could.
My only, I guess, issue would be how it would be handled, because it's so close to the next league year that you wonder how that would affect things, because a lot of teams like to settle things down, get their coach, in early January, and then from there they know they can plan ahead for the next year. They can even get their rest and prepare for things like that. And I think that might be the only issue with this. But I agree that it would only make things better for the current, like the playoffs, the current league year going on. If coaches were left to focus on their task at hand, etc. But for the next question here from Zach at @thatdad_, that's a terrific Twitter handle. Said Marcus Sherrills has not had any kick return or punt return touchdowns this year. He's due, and this would be the perfect time in the playoffs to get some momentum going there. Thoughts on how well you think the special teams is setting up running lanes for him?
This is a bit of a difficult question, just because special teams is not my forte. No pun intended there, Matt Forte.
That has nothing to do with it. That's not a pun. That's just a word that you said that happens to be the same as his last name. That's not a pun.
I love Marcus Sherrills. I think that Marcus Sherrills does a great job. That's a guy early in his career where I looked at him and was like, I don't really understand why he's on this team, because he wasn't effective as a cornerback, and in my opinion, he still isn't all that effective in that arena, but he's so dominant as a punt return guy that, I think that he can play in this league for a very long time, because that's the type of player that Marcus Sherrills has been throughout his entire career. He's been very unselfish, quiet, keeps his, tries to keep everything in front of him, as opposed to just sitting there and, taking all the heat that he gets from Vikings Twitter and all that. And, it's nice to see that a guy is that confident in his ability that he just kind of goes about his business in a good way. But I think that for people that don't know, I think that he could afford to be a little bit more flashy. Maybe if he does happen to score a touchdown during the postseason, maybe he's the one that throws the celebration or something like that. Just because I think that he's the type of player that has earned recognition in Minnesota as being a dominant punt return guy. But if he wants to kind of market himself in a better way, I think he needs to be a little bit louder. And I mean that in the kindest way possible, because in my personal opinion, he's just a very humble guy that doesn't necessarily feel comfortable, expressing himself in a vocal way to the public, I suppose. And I think that Marcus Sherels could do a lot of good for his wallet if, maybe he threw a great celebration after scoring or something like that. I think that would do a lot for his career. So he's definitely been very impressive, and I think that the special teams as a whole has actually done a pretty solid job creating lanes for him. It's just a matter of, when it happens versus how, I suppose.
Yeah, I think there's a fine line between, a 15-yard return and a touchdown when returning punts. But I'm going to bring up some numbers that I'm actually looking up right now on Pro Football Reference. So Marcus Sherels has returned in total kick returns and punt returns. Let's see, whatever 208 plus 51 is. That'd be what, 259? 259 career returns. He's lost a fumble twice.
Really?
2 lost fumbles in his career as a return man. So I think that's a pretty good percentage, and that's another reason why he's so good as a returner. He's just so reliable. He doesn't make those mistakes.
He really is.
So that's just another. I mean, it's not always about getting your touchdown numbers up if you're fumbling every other time, right? So I think that we should recognize that as well. But on to the next one here. A little off topic. It's not off topic, but it's not Vikings related per se. From Sanka, our buddy Sanka at UK Skull. Who would you want to replace John Gruden on Monday Night Football as the color analyst? Because John Gruden did just sign a hilariously massive contract as head coach for the Raiders. 10 years, $100 million. That's completely absurd. The Raiders are morons, but Sanka says he likes Bruce Arians to replace Gruden in the booth.
Ooh, yeah. Okay, I've always been a huge fan of Bruce Arians, personally. I think, this isn't a guy that I've ever had physical contact with, but I think that I understand him, and he just kind of goes about his business the way he thinks is best for his team. So I would love to see Bruce Arians up in the booth somewhere. It doesn't necessarily need to be Monday Night Football. It could be as just a commentator, just whatever he thinks is best for his situation. I think it would be great for him. He's done a lot for the Arizona Cardinals, I think. But he still has a lot to give, I believe, and I think that putting him on air and allowing him to sort of explain football in a better way, I suppose, would really benefit football fans as a whole. So I would love to see a guy like Bruce Arians up at the booth somewhere.
I have 2 names that I think would be even better than Bruce Arians. One is Randy Moss.
Ooh,
that'd be really fun, right?
Yeah.
But then the other one that I would assume ESPN could afford this and be able to pluck him from CBS, Tony Romo on Monday Night Football.
Please.
In there with whatever that other guy, that short bald guy's name is. I think that'd be pretty good. You get to boost your ratings, I am assuming, a little bit that way. Next question here. This is a good question. This is one of the better questions we've ever been asked on Twitter. This is Dr. Jimmy Rustler 1. He says,
"Hey Doc,
what do you think Bobby Wade had for lunch today?"
Bobby Wade. I'm gonna say a turkey sub with tomatoes, lettuce, tomatoes, maybe a little bit of pepper jack cheese.
Pepper jack cheese.
Pepper jack cheese,
that.
yeah, I think so. And I see. I don't know Bobby Wade all that well, so this is difficult for me.
So we have to go off of him as the very, very poor number 1 receiver the Vikings had in 06, 07. He was their guy, and it was really sad that he was, but he was the guy, and he was what is he, 5'10", 170, just a small little guy that got gobbled up by bigger corners. I don't know.
In my opinion,
I'm going to go with a grilled cheese.
Grilled cheese?
Yeah.
In my opinion, he should add some fruit and vegetables to the mix. If he's not already, I assume, knowing what I do about Bobby Wade, that he should probably add some fruit and vegetables to the mix. So maybe an apple every now and then, maybe a pear. Those personally, I really like apples and pears. I also like peaches as well. So I would recommend those to Bobby Wade.
Fruit and vegetables are not necessary for sustaining life. Next question from our buddy Mr. Amazin at @IKeepIt_SoReal.
So real.
we can kind of go through the wildcard matchups now and pick them because of this question. If you had a choice as to how the NFC wildcard games play out, who would you most like the Vikings to match up against in the divisional round?
Well, okay, so I don't like the idea of playing the Rams again. Simply because
Really?
you play a team twice. I've said this before. You have a higher probability of losing because they know you better than you probably think they do, to a degree. That's why divisional matchups are so difficult, in my personal opinion. I think it would be nice to see them crush like Atlanta, for example.
They can't play Atlanta in the second round, but yeah.
Okay. Well, at some point in time, it would be
NFC Championship. That is a matchup that could happen, and
right.
that would be fun.
That would be a lot of fun. So, to be honest with you, I don't really care who the Vikings play. I'm very, very confident right now that they can take down any team. For me, I just want to see them beat teams that have hurt them in the past. I would love to see them crush Atlanta because of '98. I would love to see them crush New Orleans because of 2009, which I'm still upset about, by the way. I'm looking right at you, Tracy Porter. Just as a whole, I think that it would be good to see. I think it would be good to see everyone just feel comfortable playing any team regardless of the situation, but I think it's in the Vikings' best interest to play against an opponent that will keep them motivated. Atlanta and New Orleans are two teams that I think they will definitely be motivated against in the postseason, just again because of the history between.
What about Carolina, though? Because they lost to Carolina, so I feel like.
But I don't want to play them again too this season. And New Orleans, to me, I understand that
if it's at US Bank Stadium, I would love to. I think the Vikings are match up really well with the Panthers at home. Yeah. But
I think that Cam Newton is the type of player that can take over a football game. I think that Mike Zimmer is the type of defensive mind that can take over a football game.
I think for Mike Zimmer, Zimmer can very well, shut him down. I think he has in the past, and I would bet on that again. But Panthers and Rams both. I think the Vikings stand a very good chance against at US Bank Stadium. And then I guess Falcons too, if they were to come to that NFC Championship game. I guess we can go right now and just pick wild card matchups while we're here, right?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Do that. So AFC is Chiefs, Titans, and then
Titans for me.
Titans there at Arrowhead. Okay.
Yeah, I would love to see that upset. I think that Marcus Mariota is better than people give him credit for, and I think that the Chiefs are not as good as people think they are. So that's where I'm at.
And then Jags, Bills in the AFC. By the way, I'm going Chiefs for that game, so we're disagreeing there. Jags, Bills. I'm going to go with the Jags, but
I'm gonna take the Bills here in an upset because I think
I don't think that's crazy.
They squeaked into the postseason, right? Like barely by the Andy Dalton. Their Buffalo.
Yeah, right.
You guys have heard that story, right? If you haven't, make sure to check that out because I thought it was pretty funny. I just want to see Bills Mafia do their thing. That's what
they get to do it in a warm climate this time. They're down in Jacksonville or down in Florida. That could it'd be a little bit of a wild card for them.
Right. I think that Jacksonville is the better team here, so I'm with you on your pick. I think they're very clearly the better team, but I would love to see Buffalo get the upset.
If LaShawn McCoy was fully healthy, and I could trust that, I might pick Buffalo, but I can't do that right now.
I understand.
In the NFC, though, Rams then play host to Atlanta, and the Saints play host to Carolina. Who do you got in those ones?
I'm going to take Atlanta. Again, I think that Atlanta is a very good team that is still sort of figuring it out, and I think that they're very experienced after last season. I'm not sure how the departure of Kyle Shanahan has truly affected them this season, simply because that's a team that I follow sort of on a day-by-day or not a day-by-day basis, but more a week-by-week basis. So I think that Atlanta certainly has the potential to pull an upset there. But yeah, so that's where I see the Falcons getting a W. And what was the other game? Did you say?
Panthers at Saints.
Panthers at Saints. I'm going to take the Saints there. I think the Saints are the better football team as a whole. They're the more complete football team, though I will say that I would argue that Cam Newton is the best player on the football field right now. It's just a matter of...
Better than Drew Brees.
Right now, yeah. I think that Drew Brees is a Hall of Famer. I've said this a million times already. I think that he is one of the best players to ever play the quarterback position. but I just don't. I don't think
he's not being asked to do a whole lot, by the way. When you have Ingram and Kamara in there,
right.
It makes things easier for him.
He's the type of guy that can turn it up in the moment, I think. But as a whole, his season has not he doesn't have these 5,000+ yard passing seasons anymore because, like you said, I don't think he's being asked to do as much as he had been in the past. So that's kind of how I feel on that situation. Yeah. I could see Carolina winning this game. We've mentioned before that Cam Newton has the capacity to take over a football game, but at the same time, I think that New Orleans is too complete of a team after hitting on Marcus Lattimore, or so it seems, for Carolina to overcome them.
It's really tough to pick against the Saints at home, and I think I'm not about to do that right now. So I'm picking the Saints in that game.
Yep.
I'll take the Rams, but I do agree that the Falcons very much could win that game. They're more experienced. They were in the Super Bowl last year. They know what it takes. And with the Rams, you have a really young team, really young coach. So things could go haywire there. But I do think it's somewhat interesting that you could make the argument right now that the NFC's worst team in this playoffs is the number 1 seed, Philadelphia, just because no Carson Wentz, and they've struggled since that injury.
I think they're going to lose.
And so, I mean, they have their home field advantage is obviously very, very, it has a huge impact up there at Lincoln Financial Field. But, I mean, they've looked rough since that injury.
I think they're going to lose.
They're having some issues, and Nick Foles better step up if they're going to make it, because, if they can host an NFC Championship game, regardless of who it's against, that's the one thing they have is their home field advantage. I don't think they have much of an edge over these other teams, because this NFC playoff field, Minnesota, New Orleans, the Rams, Falcons, and Panthers, all of them are very, very good football teams. And I think all of them right now matching up without Carson Wentz, I think all of them are superior to Philadelphia.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I can see Philadelphia getting complacent during this bye week, and ultimately falling a little bit short. And I think to a degree you can blame that on Carson Wentz being out. But at the same time, I think that it's a fairly complete roster there. But like you said, and I think this is probably the most important point, is heading into the postseason, they did not look like the same team before.
Right.
And we've seen a lot of teams in the past fall off a cliff after finishing a season in, let's call it, not the right way, or not the optimal way, I suppose.
Yeah, I agree. I just think, I don't know. I think Carson Wentz, I definitely underestimated him for sure. I was wrong about him, and his value to this team, it's more than I ever could have imagined it would be.
He's always been a great guy, in my opinion, and he's certainly earned that type of recognition.
Yeah, he did get second team All-Pro, by the way.
Second team All-Pro?
So after missing the last 3 games there, so that's something in itself.
Let's extend this real quick, since I think we're about at the end of the show here, if I'm right.
Yeah.
In your opinion, is Carson Wentz the league's MVP despite missing a couple of games this year?
See, that's the issue with MVP awards, is that people don't take it literally, right? If it was most valuable player, in the NBA, LeBron James would win it every single year.
Right.
Aaron Rodgers would probably win it this year, or Tom Brady. One of those two guys probably would win it. And this year, Carson Wentz definitely vaulted himself into that.
I would say he's for me personally, if I had a vote, which I do not, I would say that Carson Wentz is the MVP.
I think there should be it should be most outstanding player instead, something like that, because, or maybe like a
mop.
Something. Sure. The NFL Mop Award.
I love it.
But I think Todd Gurley is a dark horse for MVP.
Okay.
I really think what he's done with the Rams.
I have a buddy that argued that, actually.
Yeah, I think he's really in that race. Obviously, Brady's in there. Breeze is in there. There's a bunch of guys in that race. But I think Gurley and Brady are kind of the favorites there. But I think, unfortunately, the Vikings don't really have an MVP candidate, because I think it's simply because they're such a team. They're so cohesive as a unit that nobody really sticks out to the national media, national watchers of the game. So they'll never really have an MVP candidate at this, the way this team is set up. But that's okay, because the Vikings will just win 13 out of 16 games in the regular season, earn a first round bye, and be the favorite in the NFC to go to the Super Bowl.
I sure hope you're right about that. So that about wraps up the show. You can find my work at zonecoverage.com. Also, make sure to check out my colleagues' work. I know that Luke Inman has been doing some great film reviews as of late. Make sure to check that stuff out. Arif Hassan has been doing his thing per standard. Nothing new there. And Sam Ekstrom also has been doing a great job reporting the news. So make sure to check out zonecoverage.com for all of your Vikings news. And if you don't check out Zone Coverage, make sure you're going over to Vikings territory. That's where you can find Drew's work. And as well as Sean Borman and the rest of the guys over there. Sam Newman puts up his videos. Austin Belial does a tremendous job. That entire staff over there at Vikings Territory also does a great job. So as a whole, I would say, Zone Coverage and Vikings Territory are probably your preeminent spots to find Vikings news. And I would highly recommend both of those. So anything else? iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Castbox. I said that I would mention this once per month, and I haven't done so already. If you'd like to donate to the show, you don't have to. But we did say that if you want to buy Drew a Little Caesars pizza or myself a Chipotle burrito, the best way you can do that is by hitting the link.
Pizza's cheaper, by the way.
Is it?
The pizza's cheaper than the burrito. Yeah.
That's your opinion. So make sure to hit that donate. I don't want to say make sure, but if you want to check out that donation link, I think that goes a long way for improving this show and improving our audio quality and that type of thing, and it improves my burrito quality. So thank you for anyone who does do that, and for anyone that doesn't, not a big deal. Just keep listening to the show. You're doing us a great service just by clicking the button. So hit the subscribe button on YouTube if you haven't already. And I believe we're out, so...
HQ just went live. I think it's time to be done with the show, huh?
HQ just went live. HQ Trivia.
Live.
Make sure to check out HQ Trivia, folks. So that is all I've got. That's all Drew's got. We will catch you guys later on this week. We don't know what we're talking about yet, but we will figure it out by that time, and we'll hope to see you guys soon.